There's a quiet moment in life when you realize you no longer fit into certain places, conversations, and routines. Nothing explicit happened. There was no fight, announcement, or dramatic breakup. Just a natural distancing. What once made sense begins to sound empty. What once seemed normal begins to bother you, and then a strange feeling arises. That of becoming alone, even surrounded by people. This is the beginning of a path that few understand and almost no one consciously chooses. The path of the minority. From an early age, we were taught to fit in, to go with the flow, to not question too much, to want what everyone else wants, to constantly seek approval, belonging, and validation. The problem is that living like this comes at too high a price. You distance yourself from yourself so you don't distance yourself from others. And little by little, you begin to live a life that seems correct on the outside, but empty on the inside. When you begin to develop awareness, this silent agreement breaks down. You start to notice patterns, repeated behaviors, conversations that lead nowhere, people who complain a lot but change nothing, environments that drain more than they build. And not because you've become better than someone else, but because you've become more attentive, more selective, more faithful to what you feel needs to be done. This change doesn't happen overnight. It starts small, an extra silence, an absence in certain situations, apolit, refusal a, decide, to be alone to organize your own thoughts. And without realizing it, you begin to move away from the rhythm of the majority. While many chase distractions, you seek clarity. While many talk too much, you observe. While many react, you choose. This is where the path begins to get lonely, because most people don't understand someone who changes without making a sound. They sense it, but they can't explain it. And when they don't understand, they interpret. They say you've changed, that you've become distant, that you're acting strangely, that you think you're better. But the truth is simpler and deeper. You've stopped living on autopilot. Being part of the conscious minority isn't a title, it's a consequence of choosing to think before acting, of preferring the discomfort of growth to the comfort of repetition, of questioning their own lives, instead of simply following the expected script. And this inevitably creates distance, because consciousness separates while many seek immediate relief. You begin to seek coherence, while many live for the weekend. You begin to think long-term. While many want to look good, you want to feel good. These choices seem small, but they change everything. They change your routine, your priorities, your relationships, and even the way you see yourself. The problem is that the path of the minority doesn't initially bring applause. On the contrary, it brings doubt, insecurity, silence. You wonder if you're overdoing it, if you shouldn't relax more, if you're isolating yourself too much. And this doubt is part of the process, because stepping outside the norm requires courage to stand by decisions without external validation. Most people prefer company to truth. They prefer being surrounded to being aligned. They prefer belonging to any group to facing the emptiness of self-discovery. And this explains why so many people remain trapped in lives they don't enjoy. They confuse solitude with failure, when often solitude is simply the necessary space to reorganize who you are. Being part of a conscious minority doesn't mean rejecting people, but redefining boundaries. You learn that you don't need to be available all the time, that you don't need to have an opinion on everything, that you don't need to participate in every conversation, that you don't need to carry problems that aren't yours. This maturity is unsettling because it breaks expectations, but it also liberates. Over time, you realize that the initial isolation isn't an end, it's a transition. You distance yourself from those who live in the noise to get closer to yourself. You learn to sustain your own silence, to trust your own perception more, to walk without needing constant approval. And this strengthens something essential, your identity. The conscious minority learns to cope with the discomfort of not being understood, because they understand that not everything that is profound is immediately understandable. Some choices only make sense after the results appear, and until then, the judgment of others is inevitable. But you learn not to defend yourself all the time, not to over-explain yourself, to let time do the work that words cannot. There's a price to pay for being different. You lose invitations, you lose certain friendships, you lose the feeling of easy belonging, but you gain something much rarer: inner coherence. You start sleeping better, you respect yourself more, you feel less guilty for saying no. You realize that being at peace with yourself is worth more than pleasing everyone. While most people are distracted, you build. While many complain, you adjust. While many live by opinion, you live by action. This doesn't make you superior. It makes you responsible. Responsible for your own choices, your own growth, your own path. And responsibility scares those who prefer to outsource their own lives. At many times, you will feel out of place. You will enter environments and realize that you no longer belong to that rhythm. You will hear conversations and feel that you have nothing to add. You will prefer silence to participating in something that no longer resonates. And that's okay. The discomfort of not belonging is a sign that you are moving towards something more aligned. The conscious minority learns to be alone without feeling empty. They learn to use silence as a tool. They learn to transform alone time into clarity, study, planning, and inner strengthening. And this skill changes everything, because those who know how to be alone don't accept just anything to avoid feeling lonely. The world works in curious ways. It tests those who deviate from the norm. It places obstacles in your path. It provokes doubt. It presents temptations to return to old comforts. But those who remain steadfast discover something important. The solitary path is not permanent. It is selective. It removes what doesn't sustain you and prepares you for more aligned connections in the future. The connections that emerge afterward are different, fewer in number, more genuine, less noisy, more profound. People who respect your pace, who understand your silences, who don't demand constant explanations. But to reach them, you need to get through the period when it seems like there's no one there. This is the point where many give up. Not because the path is wrong, but because the silence is frightening. They return to the familiar noise, to the old distractions, to the patterns that no longer serve them. And in doing so, they delay their own growth. Not out of malice, but out of fear of being alone with themselves. Being part of a conscious minority requires courage to tolerate one's own company. It requires maturity not to sell out for acceptance. It requires clarity to know where you want to go, even without guarantees. And this clarity doesn't come ready-made. It's built little by little, day by day, in the small choices that no one sees. You begin to understand that you don't need to convince anyone of your path. That results speak louder than speeches. That attitude communicates more than explanations. And that, in the end, respect comes to those who remain true to their own process, even when it means walking alone for a while. Perhaps today you feel out of place. Perhaps you feel you no longer fit in as you once did. Perhaps you miss connections, but can't go back to how things were. If that's the case, don't rush to fill that void. It's not a mistake. It's space. Space for something more aligned to emerge. The path of the minority is not for everyone, and that's okay. But if you feel you've been called to it, honor that. Not with arrogance, but with responsibility. Not with total isolation, but with discernment. Not with contempt for the world, but with commitment to yourself. Now I want to speak directly to you. Do you feel like you're distancing yourself from places, habits, or people that no longer make sense? Write in the comments, not has complaint, but as an acknowledgement of your own process. If this content resonated with you, please like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who is also experiencing this silent period of transition. Because In the end, those who accept walking alone for a while discover that they were actually being prepared for something much bigger.